Whoa! You can clap, it's all right. Thank you. We love applause before we begin. Double, double, toil and trouble.
Fire, burn, and cauldron. Yay.
Well, welcome everyone to our modern day trial, and thank you for coming. We're extremely excited to have you with us, whether you're here live or whether you're watching online. All of you are going to get a chance to vote on this trial today. How many of you have been to one of these before? All right. So welcome back to those of you who are joining us again, and to those of you who are here for the first time. We're delighted to have you. We're going to decide the fate of the Weird Sisters today. They're not actually called witches in the play. They're called Weird Sisters. Huh. My name is Eli Simon. I'm the artistic director of New Swan Shakespeare Festival that exists down in Orange County.
And I'm Julia Lupton, director of the New Swan Shakespeare Center. And we are excited to be in Berkeley hosting this, our 5th UC Shakespeare trial. We have a lot of people to thank for their help in producing this multifaceted event. From Berkeley Law, we would like to thank Alex A.G. Shapiro, Charles Cannon, Nancy Donovan, Erin Deneen, and Lori Frazier. From Stanford Law, we would like to thank Mary Elizabeth Fitzpatrick and Stephanie Ash. From UC Irvine, we'd like to thank Jesus Lopez, our production manager, plus Pam Marsden and Jen Dugan. And here at Freight and Salvage, we'd like to thank Andrea Hersick and the whole amazing staff who has been working to adjust and accommodate and make this day extremely special for everyone. We could not do it without you.
All right, now we're going to applaud. Thank you. All right, so we'd also like to just take a moment, if you're Warriors fans, to thank you for being here. And many of us are going to watch the game after the trial, so we're asking you to not. It's a spoiler alert, right? We're not going to talk about the score, okay? Or cheer the Warriors while the witches are up or while the trial is going on. But thank you for that. Let's see. Okay, so now we're going to present a few key scenes. What's that? Oh, yeah. I'm supposed to talk about the exits, which are here if you need to escape, or here, or straight back. These are the exits in case of emergency. All right, thank you. And now we're going to present a few key scenes from the play itself. All right? And so I'd like to just thank our New Swan actors that are here. That's Hope Andrejack, Meg Evans, Abel Garcia, and Evan Lugo. Okay, here's a little background on what you're about to see. Well, how many of you know this play pretty well? All right, so I'll do this quickly. Macbeth is a general in the army of King Duncan in Scotland, and he is returning victorious from a bloody battle. There, he meets 3 weird sisters. Again, these are not called witches in the play. And they greet him with his old title, Thane of Glamis, but also with 2 new titles he does not yet possess, Thane of Cawdor, and that's one of the rebels he has just vanquished, and King Hereafter, an office far beyond his current expectations. These prophecies will lead Macbeth to do some terrible things. With some prompting, get ready to hiss, by his ambitious wife, Lady Macbeth. Okay, here is the opening of Act 1, Scene 2, on the Heath.
Where hast thou been, sister?
Killing swine.
sailor's wife had chestnuts in her lap, and munched and munched and munched. Give me, quoth I, a runt the witch, the rump-fed Runyon cries. Her husband's to Aleppo gone, master of the tiger. But in a sieve I'll thither sail, and like a rat without a tail, I'll do, and I'll do. I'll give thee a wing.
And I another.
And I myself have all the other. In the very ports they blow, all the quarters that they know. I, the shipman's card, I will drain him dry as air. Sleep shall neither night nor day hang upon his penthouse lid. He shall live a man forbid. Weary Sir Knights, 9 times 9 shall he dwindle, peak, and fine. Though his bark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest-tossed. Look what I have! Show me, show me! Here, I have a pilot's thumb, wrecked as homeward he did come.
A drum, Macbeth doth come.
The weird sisters, hand in hand, posters of the sea and land,
Thus do go about.
thrice to thine and thrice to mine, and thrice again to make up 9.
Peace, the charm's wound up.
So foul and fair a day I have not seen. Speak, if you can. What are you?
All hail, Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis.
All hail, Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor.
All hail, Macbeth. Thou shalt be king hereafter.
Hail.
Stay, you imperfect speakers. Tell me more. By Sinel's death I know I am Thane of Glamis, but how of Cawdor? The Thane of Cawdor lives a prosperous gentleman, and to be king stands not within the prospect of belief than to be Cawdor. Say from whence you owe this strange intelligence, or why upon this blessed heath you stop my way with such prophetic greeting. Speak, I charge you.
In this next scene, Macbeth has killed King Duncan and ordered the death of his best friend Banquo. He returns to the witches once more for guidance, and this is from Act 4, Scene 1. Harp your cries! 'Tis time. 'Tis time.
round about the cauldron go. In the poisoned entrails throw. Toad, that under cold stone, days and nights, as 31 swelt of venom sleeping got, boil thou first in the charmed pot. Double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, fillet of a fenny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake. Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing. For a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth, boil and bubble.
Double,
toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Scale of dragon. Tooth of wolf. Witch's mummy. Maw and gulf of the ravened salt sea shark. Roots of hemlock digged in the dark. Liver of a man untrue. Gall of goat and slips of you, slivered in the moon's eclipse. Now we add the nose and lips. Finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab. Make the gruel thick and slab. Add thereto a tiger's chaudron for the ingredients of our cauldron.
Double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Cool it with a baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and good. Well done. Let us commend our pains, and everyone shall join in the games.
And about the cauldron sing, like elves and fairies in a ring.
Chanting all that we put in. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Open locks, whoever knocks.
How now? You secret evil midnight hags, what is it you do?
deed without a name.
A deed without a name.
A deed without a name.
So, those were our very weird sisters. We're now ready to begin our trial. And so we would like to first welcome our distinguished lawyers, Erwin Chemerinsky, Jesse H. Choper, Distinguished Professor of Law and Dean of Berkeley Law, will be arguing for the prosecution. Bernadette Meyler, Carl and Sheila Spaeth, Professor of Law and Associate Dean for Research and Intellectual Life at Stanford, will be arguing for the defense.
And also please welcome the Honorable Andrew Guilford, 14-year veteran of the U.S. District Court in California. Judge Guilford will read the charges and preside over the trial. And after the trial, once again, you will receive instructions on how to vote. Because remember, you are the members of the jury today. And the weird sisters will sit here with their defense attorney, Bernadette Meyler. And Macbeth will sit with the prosecution, Erwin Chemerinsky.
Thank you. First, I must say it's great bringing this community together to celebrate art and artists, 3 great law schools and their faculty, and the new Swan Shakespeare Center at UC Irvine. It's worth a trip down there if you get a chance, just as I always value this trip up here every year. This court is now in session. Alas, the witchy ones did stir a brew, and trouble soon did form a blackened spot. So then the law arose with all that's true, and asked the seedest one for justice sought. You are the jury. You will be allowed to vote on the outcome of the defendants to my right. You will be asked to vote on 2 separate charges. Are the weird sisters guilty or not guilty of violating California Penal Code Section 383, prohibiting the sale or other disposal of food, drink, drug, or medicine, knowing that the same is adulterated or otherwise unwholesome or unfit to be eaten or drunk, with the intent to permit the same to be eaten or drunk. Next, are the weird sisters guilty or not guilty of violating California Health and Safety Code Section 7208, which specifies that every person who unlawfully disposes, uses, or sells the body of an unclaimed dead person is guilty of a misdemeanor. So I will now call the prosecution to present their case.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Judge Guilford, it's wonderful to appear before you again.
What if Macbeth had never met those three-word sisters? What if those three-word sisters hadn't developed their evil potion that had such hallucinogenic effect? How many lives have been saved in this bloody story? What we know is that these three sisters are regarded by history as witches. We know a great deal about witches. We know they're prepared from their role young age. When they go to school, all they learn about is how to spell. In writing, they only learn cursive. You can learn a great deal about them by going to their parking lot. You realize they're among the few people who still know how to drive a stick. And you can see that they're mean because of the signs that say, violators will be toads. And if you need to know more about the witches, you can just look it up in Wikipedia. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're asked to imagine that the events of Macbeth occurred not in 11th century Scotland, but in California today. You're asked to decide whether those events violate California law. I think the answer is clear, that the three weird sisters are very much the embodiment of evil in the story of Macbeth. There are so many crimes that they could be charged with. As Judge Guilford said, we're focusing on two. One is that they illegally used unclaimed body parts in violation of California law. As Judge Guilford just pointed out, California Health and Safety Code, Section 7208, makes it a crime in this state to use unclaimed body parts. This is important. Why do we have such a law? In part, it's about protecting the dignity of individuals, respecting the dignity of the human body. In part, it's about autonomy. I've decided that I want my organs when I die to be donated, but others make a different choice, and we respect that choice. And so the only question before you from the record is whether they were using parts of human bodies without consent. And you heard it performed before you. But let me remind you from Article 4, Act 4, Scene 3, where it says, and I quote some of the things that they put into that cauldron you saw: liver of blasphemous Jew, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, finger of birth-strangled babe. But this wasn't the only place where they were impermissibly using human body parts. If you look earlier at Act 1, Scene 3, one of the weird sisters, the first says, "Here I have a pilot's thumb. Wicked as homeward he did come." So you see, over and again, they're taking human body parts without consent, without permission. What's your reaction to this? I hope it's that you're offended, that you're disgusted. But in addition to it being offensive and disgusting, it's also a crime under California law. So on the first of these charges, the clear result is guilty. But there is a second charge here, and this focuses on how they created an adulterated food or drug. Now, here I want to read to you California law, because the words of the statute become important. We're focusing on California Penal Code Section 363. And it says, and I quote, "Every person who knowingly sells or keeps or offers for sale or otherwise disposes of any food, drink, drug, or medicine, knowing that the same is adulterated or has become tainted, decayed, spoiled, or otherwise unwholesome, or unfit to be eaten or drink, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor." It says the term drug is used in here. It includes all medicine for internal or external use. And then it gives a long list of how it might be used within the meaning of the statute. The term food is used herein, includes all articles used for food or drink by man, whether simple, mixed, or composed. Any article is deemed to be adulterated, and then it gives a definition. For drugs, I would focus you on the third subpart, where it says, if its strength, quality, or purity falls below the professed standard on which it's sold. For food, it says, if any substance or substance mixed with it so as to become or depreciate or injuriously affect its quality, strength, or purity. It says, in part, if it consists wholly or in part of a diseased, decomposed, putrid, infected, tainted or rotten animal or vegetable. It says if it contains any added substance or ingredient which is poisonous or injurious to health. Think of the performance you saw a moment ago. You have a unique opportunity as a jury. You got to see the evidence for yourself. And what you notice from it is, in terms of the requirements of California law, there are two things to think about. First, was there adulterated drug or food? And then second, can it be considered drug or food under the statute? In terms of being adulterated, there's no doubt of the evil motive of the Weird Sisters. They tell you of their evil motive. Again, from Act 4, Scene 1. It says, like a hell broth boil and bubble. It says, for a charm of powerful trouble. We also heard performed the words, by pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. They tell you what their motive was. Was it adulterated? Well, remember what you saw put into that cauldron? Let me remind you and think of the statutory language that I read you. Scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw and gulf, of the remind sea cell shark, liver of blasphemous Jew, gulp of goat and slips of yew, sliver to the moon's eclipse, nose of Turk and Tartan's lips, finger of birth strangled babe, and on it goes on with the things that they put in. Can you have any doubt from this what it was? Earlier it pointed out that they'd put in a fillet of Benny snake in the cauldron, head and bake, eye of newt and toe of frog, wood of bat and tongue of dog. Could you imagine anything more adulterated than this? Now the question is, does it count as drug or food? Well, here you need to look at how the California Penal Code statute has been interpreted. And so the leading case interpreting what drug means under it is Downing versus California State Board of Pharmacy. And it says, drugs are articles intended to affect the structure or function of the body of man or animals, including internal or external use. So they create this cauldron that emits fumes. And what's the effect of it? A powerful hallucinogenic effect. For just after the scene that you had performed, Macbeth then has apparitions come. He's hallucinating. And this, of course, was the purpose of the Weird Sisters all along, to create the hallucinogenic substance, to have the apparitions form that then have the evil effect through the play. So it does count as adulterated. It is a drug. It was meant to be a drug or a food, and it had exactly the effect the Weird Sisters wanted. So on both of the charges, it's clear that the defendants are guilty. What might the defense lawyers say to you in response to this? The evidence seems so abundantly clear. Well, from our pretrial conference, it appeared that the defense lawyer was going to argue free exercise of religion, that the Weird Sisters cannot be convicted because they were practicing their religion. Well, to start with, there's no evidence whatsoever in the record that they regarded this as a religion that they were practicing. But even if it were a religion that they were practicing, the law is clear that there is no defense under the First Amendment that they can invoke. There is a Supreme Court case, almost exactly on point, with remarkably similar facts. It's Employment Division versus Smith from 1990. Oregon law prohibited consumption of peyote, a hallucinogenic substance. Native Americans argued that their religious rituals required the use of peyote. They brought a challenge to the Oregon law. They lost in the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court explained that people can't get exceptions from laws on account of their religious beliefs. The Supreme Court said, so long as it's a neutral law, not motivated by desire to interfere with religion, and so long as it's a law that affects everyone, there can't be an exception based on free exercise. I'll give you an easy example. Imagine a Jewish family that wants to use wine in a Sabbath or Seder dinner. Or imagine a priest that wants to use wine in communion. Imagine it's one of the counties in the United States that prohibits all consumption of alcohol. Can they bring a challenge based on free exercise of religion? The law is clear. No, they would lose. Because the law prohibiting consumption of alcohol was not motivated by desire to interfere with religion, and it's a law that applies to everyone. Well, think of the two statutes we're focusing on here. One that prohibits the use of dead bodies that are unclaimed, and the other that prohibits adulterated drugs and food. Neither was motivated by desire to interfere with religion. Both apply to everyone equally, and thus there's no basis for a free exercise challenge. Why is the law this way? Well, in part, we're a society with so many religions, it would cause chaos if people could have exemptions from law just by invoking a religious belief. Also, were we to start to give exceptions for religious beliefs, then courts would face the impossible task of defining what is a religion and what's a sincerely held religious belief. So, under clearly established law, there is no free exercise defense for these defendants. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, these defendants have committed serious crimes. This is not a witch hunt. The evidence is overwhelming. This is an open-shut cauldron of a case. The only possible verdict based on this evidence is guilty on both charges.
Thank you, Counselor. And now we'll hear from the defense. Proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury and Judge Guilford, this case is about an overweening public health bureaucracy trying to find a way to pin the blame for a terrible tragedy on someone it can punish. Public health apparatchiks have alighted on my clients as the objects of their persecution and are now conducting a literal witch hunt against these sincere religious practitioners. As you know, a real tragedy has occurred here. Many people have lost their lives because of Mr. Macbeth's ruthless ambition. Spurred on by his conniving and equally ruthless wife, Mr. Macbeth stopped at nothing to achieve his dreams of world domination. But he's dead. So now the state of California needs to find someone, anyone, to convict in order to make sure that the governor and other public officials look like they're in charge and aren't voted out of office. Searching for possibilities, they noticed my clients peacefully engaged in their centuries-old ceremonies and traditions. I will first mention that I shall follow the state's designation of my clients as the so-called Weird Sisters. I do not do so because my clients approve of that moniker, but rather because both their lives and their livelihoods are at stake here. They wish to remain anonymous for fear that their actions will be distorted by media scrutiny. Even if they're acquitted in court today, as I hope they will be, the court of public opinion may unfairly condemn them. If their true identities were known, they would receive death threats or become unemployable after this trial. The chain of events for which the Weird Sisters are being prosecuted today arose when they were innocuously practicing their long-standing religious rituals in open spaces, on a heath and in a witch's haunt, when Mr. Macbeth came along. As with many religions, the Weird Sisters often engaged in the preparation of certain ritual items. One of these was the potion that they brewed in a cauldron, as you saw. Some of the ingredients of that potion included human remains. The state has argued that those remains were improperly disposed of under California law. And you've heard my distinguished opposing counsel argue that, that this is a neutral statute. But California law exempts other groups from the restrictions of its burial statutes. And the US Supreme Court has told us on many occasions that if an otherwise neutral law has exemptions for other religious or non-religious activities, it must exempt religious activities as well. The state, furthermore, has claimed that my clients gave the potion to Mr. Macbeth intending that it be consumed, and thereby violated California law forbidding people from providing unwholesome food, drink, or drugs. As I will argue, though, my clients made their potion as part of their religious practice, intended to produce certain results in the world through what others might consider magical causation, but they didn't make it as a drink of whatever kind to be ingested. So I want to turn first to my client's disposal of human remains. As my distinguished opposing counsel mentioned, in their description of the contents of the potion, the Weird Sisters have used some unfortunate language that we would consider racist or otherwise discriminatory, mentioning the liver of blaspheming Jew or nose of Turk and Tartar's lips. They do refer at the same time, though, to the witch's mummy, which is not contemporary terminology either, and which they themselves would find offensive in a current context. The reason for this outdated language, I believe, is that they are pronouncing a ritual incantation that has been in existence for 500 years or more. Varying it might fundamentally change the religious significance of the ritual. So I would urge you not to judge my clients negatively on the basis of this offensive language alone. The gravamen of the state's complaint, though, is that my clients have improperly disposed of the remains that they've mentioned and that they added to their potion. It's important to note that there's no evidence that they have come by these remains improperly. My opposing counsel mentioned that they may have offended the dignity of those who died, but we don't know whether perhaps people donated their bodies after death to my clients. The only assertion that the state can back up is that my clients did not dispose of the remains in accordance with what the public health bureaucracy requires. But I want to turn to some other provisions of California law. In particular, there are procedures to ensure the repatriation of Native American remains and also to ensure non-interference with the free expression of Native religion, except in circumstances of public interest and necessity. Also, Governor Newsom recently signed a measure into law that will allow for the composting of human remains and their use in soil for growing food. The fact that state law allows a different track for the treatment of certain remains suggests that the state should also permit a religious exemption for the Weird Sisters' use of human remains under the First Amendment. As you know, and as my opposing counsel has mentioned, the First Amendment specifies that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. My opposing counsel referred to the 1990 case, saying that this provision doesn't mean that a state or federal government can not pass a neutral law of general applicability. So that the state can pass a neutral law of general applicability even if it burdens religious freedom. But what is a neutral law of general applicability? This means a law that's not specifically targeting a particular religion or doesn't have exemptions for other religious or non-religious activities. In another case, a few years after Employment Division against Smith, the Supreme Court struck down a Florida law that prohibited the practice of ritual animal sacrifice under the auspices of the Santeria religion because it was found to be targeting religious activity. More recently, in the 2021 case of Fulton against the City of Philadelphia, the court held that Philadelphia could not refuse to contract with Catholic Social Services to provide foster care on the basis of the organization's prohibition on same-sex foster parents because the city allowed other exemptions from the relevant non-discrimination provisions on a case-by-case basis. California's public health bureaucracy has itself recently been taken to task by the US Supreme Court for violating religious individuals' constitutional free exercise rights. Early in the COVID pandemic, California moved to prohibit all indoor worship. A majority of justices on the Supreme Court voted to strike down that restriction on the grounds that it infringed on the free exercise of religion. Some of the justices in the majority in that case explained that, quote, California has openly imposed more stringent regulations on religious institutions than on many businesses. So within the past few years, the Supreme Court has taken California to task for restricting religious activities in the name of public health while allowing similar things to happen under a non-religious guise. If California here can make an exception to its general regime for disposing of human remains for purposes of composting, or to respect other groups' religious or cultural practices surrounding burial, it must grant the Weird Sisters the right to incorporate human remains into their religious rituals as well. I urge you, therefore, to acquit my clients on the charge of unlawfully disposing of an unclaimed dead person in violation of California Health and Safety Code. Let us not reach a conclusion in this case that will again subject California law to overturning by the US Supreme Court. The state also argues, though, that my clients have offended the provision of California law prohibiting the disposal of food, drink, drug, or medicine knowing the same is adulterated or otherwise unwholesome or unfit to be eaten or drunk with intent to permit the same to be eaten or drunk. We are not arguing here that the Weird Sisters brew was wholesome. They knew very well that it was unwholesome and hence not fit to be eaten or drunk. The crucial element here is their intent. As the basis of a prosecution under Penal Code Section 383, California law requires that the person or persons disposing of or selling unwholesome or adulterated foods intend that the same be eaten or drunk. It's the state's burden to prove that intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I wanted you to notice a sleight of hand that my opposing counsel made. He referred to the evil motives of the witches in creating their potion. A motive isn't the same as an intent for the potion to be consumed. They may have had evil motives, but no intent for anyone to actually drink the potion. In the classic 1899 case of People against Hoffman, the California Supreme Court stated this principle very clearly when it said, the act of selling diseased and unwholesome meat is not of itself a crime. To knowingly sell or a diseased or unwholesome meat, knowing it to be so diseased or unwholesome with intent to permit it to be eaten is a crime. But it might be sold under many circumstances, and such selling would not be a crime. It might be sold with no knowledge on the part of the seller that it was diseased or unwholesome. We're not claiming that here. It might be sold with no intention on the part of the seller to permit it to be eaten. That's what we are claiming. It might be sold as a fertilizer or for many other purposes besides that of being eaten. In this instance, the Weird Sisters merely prepared their brew and did not even attempt to sell it. Has the prosecution pointed to anything the Weird Sisters said indicating that they meant for Mr. Macbeth to consume the potion? My distinguished colleague has not. As in the Hoffman case, there are many other uses for what the Weird Sisters made than consumption. Much of their conversation around concocting the potion suggests that they intended it to have a magical effect on the world without being eaten or drunk at all. The first Weird Sister asked Mr. Macbeth, quote, "If thou hadst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters," after which she puts more materials on the flame and summons a spirit. According to the Weird Sisters' belief, the potion produces spirits without needing to be drunk or otherwise consumed. The Weird Sisters cannot be held legally responsible for what Mr. Macbeth did or did not do with the potion. Their creation of the potion in no way suggested an intent for it to be consumed. Instead, their words indicate that they anticipated it would have an effect without being drunk at all. Because the state has not carried its burden of proving that the Weird Sisters intended for any unwholesome item to be consumed, I ask you to acquit them of the charge of violating Penal Code Section 383 as well. In closing, I want to bring your attention to the fact that today, the California public health bureaucracy is again trying to interfere with religious practices. Just recently, the same functionaries tried to shut down churches using COVID as an excuse. Now they have singled out an unpopular minority to prosecute on trumped-up charges, thinking that Californians will be indifferent because only religion is at stake. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard these sisters today referred to as weird. And weird they are. I'm proud to say that I, too, am a little bit weird. Maybe all of us Californians are a bit weird. We are certainly called so by many of our fellow Americans. Am I the only one who hopes to keep California weird? I believe that you, wise jurors, will send a signal in this case that California is still a place where non-traditional religions can be practiced and where weird sisters are not demonized. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. The prosecution may now briefly respond.
Oh, what a tangled web we've practiced to deceive. Now, that actually doesn't come from Shakespeare, but it certainly applies to the defense arguments that you just heard. She wants to talk about the public health bureaucracy. And of course, it's the Food and Drug Administration at the national level. It's state laws like this that ensure that the drugs and food we have are wholesome. And we see nationally how conservatives are trying to attack the Food and Drug Administration to have its approval of drugs like mifepristone overturned. And where will they stop? You see here today, there's no stopping point at the attack on the bureaucracy that's meant to protect us. Defense counsel wants to blame Macbeth. But this is just a traditional defense tactic of blaming the victim to try to shift attention from what the defendants did in this case that plays such a crucial responsibility in all of the events that follow. We focus here on two crimes. The first is the impermissible use and disposal of human body parts. So what arguments does defense counsel make? She says, first, this is unfortunate language. Remember the exact words in the record before you. What was put into the cauldron was liver of blasphemous Jew, nose of Turk, finger of birth-strangled babe, and thumb of a pilot. Is there any possible way to interpret that other than these were body parts? You saw it yourself with your own eyes. She said, well, maybe they donated their body parts so it doesn't violate the law. Is there a shred of evidence in the record that would suggest that they donated their body parts? You're supposed to use your common sense as jurors. Let's start with the thumb of the pilot from a wreckage. Do you think before he was in the wreckage he said, oh, weird sisters, you can have my thumb when I die? Finger of birth-strangled babe. But the mother of the dead child said, oh, weird sisters, you can have the fingers. That a Jew said, oh, you're going to call me blasphemous so you can have my liver to do what you want? The Turk, it stretches credibility to say there's any chance that this was donated body parts. I want to come back to the religion argument in more detail, but she says there are other instances where we allow for religious disposal, but that's always with the consent of the person. When we deal with Native American remains, it's always about how should they be dealt with the consent of Native American tribes. Here the key point was there wasn't consent of these individuals, and therefore their body parts could not be used in religious rituals or otherwise without violating California law. There is no way, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to read the record in this case except that the weird sisters used body parts in a way that violates California law. Well, there is a second offense, and that's that this was adulterated food and drug in violation of California law. And I read you the statute carefully so that you would know the language that you're to apply. And here, what does defense counsel say? It says, well, there wasn't intent to use this as a drug or a food. What was the intent of the weird sisters? They tell you that it was an evil intent. They say that they're creating a charm of powerful trouble. They say it's a hell-bent wrong. They say it will be wicked results. Now, what are they trying to do? I think it's clear that what they're trying to do was intoxicate Macbeth so he would hallucinate. And what's the evidence of that? Immediately after Macbeth is near the cauldron, he does hallucinate. He sees the apparitions. They, of course, lead to many of the deaths that follow. This is what the weird sisters intended to do. This is what they succeeded in doing, and that therefore it violates the law. Now, it's not a question here of did he consume and drink this potion, because remember the statutory language. It can be a drug if it's either for internal or external use. So the fumes from this cauldron that had a hallucinogenic effect count in California law as a drug, and therefore, since it was adulterated, and it was obviously and clearly adulterated, violates the law. a great deal of this discussion focuses on the religion claim. Now, to start with, is there any evidence in the record before you that the Weird Sisters saw themselves as practicing a religion? If not, that just ends this claim. But there is, even if it is a religion, a Supreme Court case on point. It's Employment Division versus Smith. And it says people don't get exceptions to laws on account of their religious beliefs. So what are the arguments that opposing counsel makes?
2 minutes, counsel.
She points to a case from now almost 30 years ago, the Church of the Babalu Kamiai versus Hialeah, Florida, that involved a state law that kept the Santeria religion from practicing its faith. But that was a law that was designed to target a particular religion. The Supreme Court said it wasn't a neutral law of general applicability because it was entirely designed to get at one religion. The laws that I talked about are general laws. She points to Fulton versus City of Philadelphia from a couple of years ago. But that was a situation where the Supreme Court said sometimes the city would give exceptions to its law and sometimes it wouldn't give exceptions to its law. There's no exceptions to the California laws that I mentioned to you because there's no exceptions. Employment Division versus Smith controls. She talks about the COVID cases, but doesn't accurately describe them to you. The first COVID case to come up was the South Bay Pentecostal Church versus Newsom. And it involved a restriction by California Governor Newsom on the number of people who could gather, including in places of religious worship. The Supreme Court 5-4 upheld it. The second of the cases that came up in July of 2020 was Calvary Chapel versus Dayton versus Sisolak from Nevada that limited the number of people who could gather in one place. The Supreme Court 5-4 upheld it. Now, as the pandemic waned, the Supreme Court came to later conclusions. But what these cases tell you is that even if there is an infringement of religion, still the government can prevail if there is a compelling interest. And I would suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that making sure that dead bodies are treated in a dignified and humane way, making sure there are not adulterated food and drugs is a compelling government interest. So as to the religion claim, it's not a religion. Even if it were, there's no violation of free exercise. And at the very least, there's a compelling government interest that justifies the prosecution. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, many people died as a result of the Weird Sisters' actions and evil potions. All I'm asking you today is hold them liable under 2 California statutes that clearly apply. One that regulates how human remains may be treated, and the other that prohibits adulterated food and drugs. On both of these counts, the only possible verdict is guilty.
Thank you, counsel. And now briefly from the defense.
So I think what my opposing counsel has said is very revealing because he's reiterated on several occasions that my clients are not practicing a religion. Now, this claim is exactly why the Supreme Court wanted to stay out of adjudication of whether a religious liberty claim was valid or not in the Employment Division against Smith case that he mentioned. Because it's very easy for the state to just not recognize something as religion. So by insisting so vehemently that my clients are not practicing a religion, the state's lawyer is himself demonstrating the problems with recognition of minority religions and recognition of religions that are not going to be part of the standard canon of religions. Now, he's also mentioned that these statutes are not targeting religious exercise. So unlike the Church of the Lugo case, that religion isn't being targeted here. Maybe a religion isn't being targeted, but the fact that there are other exemptions within the burial regime, including the exemption for composting human bodies that was recently passed into law, suggests that religiously motivated exemptions should be valid as well. And this is the lesson that I take from the COVID cases, that when there were businesses that were permitted to be open, but churches were restricted on having indoor gatherings, that the Supreme Court found that that was not an acceptable balance. So regardless of the state interest, if the state has a sufficiently compelling interest, it shouldn't be making an exception for certain things, but not for religion. Now, perhaps my distinguished opponent would go back to his point that these other measures are through the consent of the parties, so that perhaps someone needs to consent to composting or consent to some other form of disposal of their remains. Now, I would say that that justification for the statute, while it's perfectly reasonable, is nowhere present in the statutory language. So my opposing counsel has really just generated that justification and then is building an argument off of that. But there's nowhere where the consent of the party who's deceased seems to be relevant in the statute itself. Now, I want to also flag to you something about what he mentioned about the motive or the intent of my clients in creating the potion. So he says, well, what could their motive have been other than to either have Mr. Macbeth ingest or otherwise be affected by the potion? So whether he ingests or not, whether it's an external or internal application, that it must have been intended to work through Mr. Macbeth rather than in some other way. Now, I want to point out that Mr. Macbeth was never in the room even when my clients were creating the potion. So they weren't creating it for him. They say whoever may enter should enter, but they're creating the potion and then he comes by. Now, I also want to point out how opposing counsel has a very secular logic about what it would mean to create an effective potion. So he thinks that a potion could be effective only if it worked through someone. So it worked as a drug to create a hallucination. Now, my clients had no such view. They did not think that they were going to make a potion that would cause someone to hallucinate. They thought they were going to make a potion that would cause something to happen. They may have had evil motives, but they wanted to cause something to happen through their potion, not through anyone actually drinking it. So the conclusion that I would reach is that opposing counsel really has demonstrated a lack of regard for minority religions and for the concerns of clients like those religious practitioners like my clients, by refusing to recognize that they are engaged in a religious practice, and also by using a kind of secular logic to explain what they might be doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Counsel. All right, can we have our house lights, please? And now, folks, it is up to you to give us the justice sought. Listen carefully to what I'm about to describe to you. You'll be asked to raise your hands, guilty or not guilty, on 2 different charges. I'm going to read those charges to you. You'll have to listen to them. I don't know which is worse, iambic pentameter or legalese, but you're going to have to listen carefully, and then we'll ask you to raise hands. So let me say, for those of you with us in the room today, we will ask for a show of hands on each of the 2 counts. Please keep your hands up while our bailiffs record your vote. For those of you viewing remotely, listen to this, the voting link is available beneath the streaming window on the same page where you are accessing this event. The voting link is available beneath the streaming window on the same page where you are assessing this event. So you will be asked to decide if the Weird Sisters are guilty or not guilty of violating California Penal Code Section 383, prohibiting the sale or other disposal of food, drink, drug, or medicine, knowing that the same is adulterated or otherwise unwholesome or unfit to be eaten or drunk, with intent to permit the same to be eaten or drunk. And you will be asked to decide if the Weird Sisters are guilty or not guilty of violating California Health and Safety Code Section 728, which specifies that every person who unlawfully disposes, uses, or sells the body of an unclaimed dead person is guilty of a misdemeanor. we will now have a show of hands on charge 1. Do we have our bailiffs ready to go? It appears so. All right. If you have decided that the guilty sisters are guilty, I'm sorry. Mistrial! A mistrial has been requested. It is denied. All right, here we go. Which is worse, guilty or weird? But if you have decided that the Weird Sisters are guilty of violating California Penal Code Section 383, prohibiting the sale or other disposal of food, drink, drug, or medicine, knowing that the same is adulterated or otherwise unwholesome or unfit, with the intent to permit the same to be eaten, drunk, please raise your hand now and keep them up as our bailiffs do the count. Keep them up. The Weird Sisters are not allowed to look at their enemies out there. Keep your hands up. And in the digital world, you can vote as instructed. Okay, still counting. Still counting. Okay, I assume we're done now. Good. All right, now, if you have decided that the Weird Sisters are not guilty of violating California Penal Code Section 383, prohibiting the sale or disposal of food, drink, drug, or medicine, knowing that the same is adulterated or otherwise unwholesome or unfit to be eaten or drunk, with the intent to permit the same to be eaten or drunk, please raise your hand now. Not guilty on the first count. Ooh, it looks pretty close. Some people are voting with 2 hands. Please be careful. Oh. My relatives and I will have a discussion about this. Keep them up there. Good, good, good. All right. Are we ready to put hands down? All right, hands down. Now we go to the second count. Charge 2. If you have decided that the Weird Sisters are guilty of violating California Health and Safety Code Section 728, which specifies that every person who unlawfully disposes, uses, or sells the body of an unclaimed dead person, please raise your hand now and keep your hands up. This would be for guilty on charge 2. All right, counting is being done. Oh, I see Ms. Wren is voting guilty. Okay. Anybody else? Still? We done? Almost done? All right. Hands down. Good. All right. Now we are not guilty on charge 2. Please raise your hand if you have decided that the Weird Sisters are not guilty of violating California Health and Safety Code Section 728, which specifies that every person who unlawfully disposes, uses, or sells the body of an unclaimed dead person. Please raise your hand now. Okay, I think we are done. The matter is now submitted for calculation. Thank you.
Okay, and while we're tabulating, because we also have to tabulate our votes from those who are viewing online, watching streaming, we're going to present, while we're tabulating, a final scene. This is our Scottish general from Act 2, Scene 1, in which he sees the image of a dagger, very famous speech, as he's on his way to kill a guest in his house, that is King Duncan. You can decide afterwards if he was guilty of... I'm just kidding. Okay.
Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this, which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still. And on thy blade, and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now, o'er the one half-world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings in withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch, thus with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides, towards his design, moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror from the time which now suits with it. Whiles I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
Yes, indeed, if they're available.
I'll find them.
Otherwise, we'll have counsel stand in for them for the verdict. Do we have a verdict?
We do.
All right, we will wait a moment. Have they escaped?
I figured they fled the jurisdiction.
Maybe they
I haven't heard
perceive.
from my clients, so.
Ah, here they are.
Thank you so much.
All right, the defendants will stand, please. Does the bailiff have a verdict? right, I thank the jury for their service, and we do have a verdict. The defendants in this case on charge 1 are found not guilty. On charge 2, the defendants are found guilty. All right, the defendants will be remanded to jail to await sentencing. This court is in recess.
Well, I'm sorry I
Well, thank you all for coming. We've done 5 of these. This has had to be the greatest trial of all time, at least so far. Thank you very much for coming. If you'd like to come and chat with any of our performers, they're here, and we really appreciate your support. Thanks again, and have a great rest of the day.